Coming up on this episode of Belief Hole.
This concept that the shadowy hand behind the military and the government has been building an infrastructure of advanced technology that perhaps we're seeing in the skies today. We might call it UFOs, we might call it aliens. We don't know what it is, but there's something going on. There's something up there. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest there is a parallel technological movement that has its own separate agenda and reality of technology, advanced craft that can stop on a dime and spin in the sky. That could be a breakaway civilization. So he's working alongside these kids who are more telekinetically prone, so they could move things with their mind. Their missions are much more devious because they're taught to become telekinetic wizard assassins, where they can remote view to find their targets and then kill them with their mind. Oh, like evil Harry Potters. Sure, telepathic ability. That sounds right. If there is some sort of clandestine operation that just plucks people off our planet for weird purposes around the galaxy, I wonder what kind of jobs you could get. Space janitor? But like if you're like an enslaved jester in some like alien court, that'd be kind of fun.
Maybe you could run a podcast.
On like an alien planet. They're really interested in like Bigfoot. Like we know aliens are real, but... There are people that you watch long enough and you can get this twinkle of authenticity. And that's kind of what it has to come down to, because at the end of the day, we're listening to officials, we're listening to whistleblowers. You can corroborate it with what's going on and make parallels and connections, but there's some level of who do you trust? Who do you trust? See, I would join Space Force if we got to do stuff like that.
Would get blown up in a spaceship?
Might be worth it if you get to go through a Stargate first and you're battling draconian lizard men.
Chris.
Might be worth it.
You get scared when your fan turns off.
Why would I get scared? Oh, it's so quiet. It does get quiet.
Like, Space Force is fine.
As long as I'm not alone in the aircraft, you know? I got an intercom that I can talk to my compatriots out there in space. You guys are out there, right?
Hello, where'd everyone go?
No, I'm frightened.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm a courageous man.
Conspiracy, synchronicity, Sasquatch, homunculus, alien races, Satanism in Hollywood, MK Ultra, Tartaria.
There's like a whole, I've been watching this one guy that...
Close the door, Jeremy! Close your door!
What's the,
Inner Earth Disagreements.
Ghost Dad!
I like that movie.
Dogman, Bohemian Grove, Corey Feldman, Magicians Are Demons, Specters, Spirits, Sleep Paralysis, Alternative History, Shadow People. Shh, quiet, I'm trying to say words with the mouth. It's getting dicey out there. Poltergeists.
That's cool. Anunnaki.
What is the moon?
Elf Tower. I would never talk about it. That's old. Y2K.
Cover-ups. Apocalyptic catastrophe. Vampire.
Welcome.
Should
Hello.
we maybe change that intro at some point? Maybe next season.
Oh, you mean the intro montage?
Yeah.
That's so hard to do in my
I know.
mind. I'm emotionally attached to a lot
But what
of
if
it.
it's even better next time? That was like one of the first things we've ever done. Imagine how much better it would be now.
That's possible.
But I know, I'm sure people will like get used to that.
Get attached. Imagine if they changed like the Cheers theme song. Where
I don't
everybody
think it's quite the caliber.
goes to hang out. Dun, dun, dun.
No, it'd be a completely new one.
That'd be worse. You build up a brand and then you destroy it. No shred of our... Anyways, we should say hello.
Yes.
Hello, listeners.
Well, hello. You caught us in the middle of a little housekeeping or backside discussions.
Okay, Jeremy.
And I don't like housekeeping because
I like how you said backside discussions, like we were going to agree with you. Like this is what they're called.
I'm just trying to use my words. You guys looked at me strangely.
So guys, we got a good one today.
I'm excited about this.
I'm excited for
But
this one.
you are excited about this one. This is one of the first things that got you into the realm of conspiracy and dark projects, stuff that you've been interested in for probably close to a decade.
Take us back, John, when you first were interested in the subject.
First started in 1945.
That was a glimmer in my father's eye.
No, I was in Lakeway, Texas with my good friend Brian. We were living out in the country, sort of. We got this like amazing deal on this big, almost like country clubbish type of home.
Wasn't it like his dad's? He let you guys stay there for
His
like a good deal.
dad's friend.
Oh, okay.
And
That's nice.
You guys had a swimming pool shaped like a tennis racket. I remember that.
Yeah.
What?
But anyways, we started getting involved in like something called Project Camelot.
Oh, yes.
And that opened my mind to a lot of this sort of fantastical, interdimensional warring and
Yeah, it was basically like a YouTube channel that would bring on whistleblowers to talk about black projects and really interesting
and this was like
interviews.
YouTube's infancy.
Yeah. Right.
It's hard to believe it's been 10 years, but it was like a completely, I mean, think about how much changed in 10 years.
Yeah.
It's really crazy how fast technology has gone and where we are now with like the, sort of the censorship stuff. And back then it was just like
the Wild West.
Wild West.
I remember that they were getting on YouTube, but I remember we found their website was before like YouTube was a thing, or like a known
it was
thing.
even before YouTube.
I remember going through their white website with the purple links, like everything like New Age themed.
Yeah.
And I have that memory so clear they had so much information from whistleblowers and people coming out, some maybe not legitimate, but some definitely had their, their bona fides.
Yeah, and there was definitely a focus on like breakaway civilization, I remember.
Yeah.
Secret space
classified
programs.
Technology.
Yeah, which is what our topic is today.
Was it Bob Lear?
Bob Greer. Or no, I'm sorry. Bob Greer.
Not Bob Lear.
It was Richard Gere?
Richard Gere.
Richard Lear?
Bob Lazar? No.
Man, Richard Dean. Bob Dean.
Bob Dean.
Well, that took us a long time.
Bob Dean.
There's a Richard Lear too.
Is there?
There's a few
John
of them
Lear.
that they would have on a lot. They were like ex-military, special forces.
Yeah, they had the clearance levels like above top secret and cosmic clearance and all this different clearances in the government or the military where they were exposed to a lot of material that just people don't see. And then when you do see it and kind of mixed in popular media and sci-fi, it comes out as fiction.
Yeah, their show was kind of an expose on a lot of these whistleblowers before the Disclosure Project, right? Was it pre-2001?
I thought it was still relatively new when we were getting involved with it, and that was back in like 2008.
It's hard to say, honestly.
Because I thought the Disclosure Project was like the day before 9/11.
Yeah, the Disclosure Project was way before that, wasn't it?
I think so. 01.
It was.
They had a lot of people on there from the Disclosure Project, I think.
Disclosure Project was done by Stephen Greer, which is someone else we might get into at some point.
Yeah.
Another like high profile name.
A lot of our listeners probably are familiar with
I'm sure.
Greer's work and summoning UFOs into the desert. And
I met him in person.
You did?
I think I told that once on the show.
were you walking Jake or something?
Yeah, I was in
Austin?
Texas, and no, I was out at Enchanted Rock.
Oh.
And he's like,
What a
"Look."
place to meet Stephen Greer.
It was so
Was he out
odd.
there looking for craft? Is that what
Yeah, he was.
Really?
I was with Dad walking Jake, and he's like, "Oh, look at that awesome dog." And I turned around and I was like, "You're fucking Stephen Greer." And he was like, "Yes, I am." And I had to pull Jake away from him because he was trying to pet him. I was like, "Oh, you can't pet Jake. He's not into that."
Yeah.
But I talked to a couple other people that were there, part of the group, and
So he was with it. Was he taking a group
yeah,
to look
he was.
for crafts?
They were literally going on to the top of Enchanted
That's
Rock
crazy.
and filming like.
The skies.
Contact in the desert kind
This
of thing.
guy did show me a picture of something very odd. I didn't know what it was. It looked like a mechanical device in the sky, and it wasn't a drone.
Well, it's interesting because later in this episode, we're going to be talking about crafts seen through night vision.
I have some good videos for you, John, that
Yeah.
is going to make you go,
Pretty amazing. Pretty
Yeah.
amazing stuff. But
We'll have them in the show notes.
Yeah, it's kind of the stuff that Greer does takes people out to look. And I think he alleges that he can like call them psychically. Isn't that that's part of the controversial
Yeah.
aspect of Greer's work?
It started when he was a kid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he uses a lot of consciousness-based
Right.
summoning.
Summoning. For those of you who don't know, Stephen Greer, he gathered a group, I think it's maybe might be like 500 now, of top scientists, former military officials, aviation experts, people in these fields and industries that had experiences or were given access or knowledge about there being a kind of existence of extraterrestrials or UFOs or reality that interacted with these entities, or just these craft. I don't even know if we know that they're extraterrestrial, but just the craft interacting with the U.S. government military. So yeah, he had that press conference. You asked if it was day before 9/11. It was in May of 2001. So a few months before September 11th happened. But that's one of the arguments is the reason this got buried. He brought together 20 members of military, government, all these different industries.
Essentially
and
like whistleblowers, right?
whistleblowers to talk about the reality of this non-human presence.
Right.
This advanced military it could be Breakaway Civilization, like we're going to talk about today. Potentially human civilization, human technology,
Or extraterrestrial.
That's parallel and advanced from us, or extraterrestrial. But the
Right,
Breakaway
but you're right.
Civilization
The
idea-
breakaway civilization is the focus today, where the evidence and allegations that point to this sort of offshoot of humankind that started developing as early as the 1930s, and at some point left our planet, or has been working in secret from our planet to basically colonize space.
Yeah.
There's space wars coming up. It's going to be an exciting episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff.
Well, I was thinking we should play. There's another clip I found that's amazing. I don't know if you've heard about the stuff that's been going on in Brazil lately. the alleged downed spacecraft in Brazil. There's these scenes that I saw online. I need to do some more validation, but pretty impressive where these missiles are being shot off at things in the sky. And
You hear it's
the
really
explosions.
creepy. I guess we could play it real quick.
There's some that seem kind of phony and a couple that seem really legit. Where you're like, is this actually going on right now in Brazil? Yeah, I was thinking we could do it on our live where we do
the one is really
videos.
creepy. It sounds really authentic, but it's like this guy's yelling in Portuguese. He's looking from a balcony during, looks like, late afternoon in Brazil. I forget what city, maybe Rio de Janeiro, I'm not sure. But you hear these like kind of air raid sirens going off, and you hear this female speaker in Portuguese, something, I don't know what she's saying, but it's like, don't go.
Some repetition.
Just like repeating this broadcast warning, whatever it is. And then
Something like this is not a drill. It
these
sounds
lights
like that.
shooting off into the sky, and I guess that they're missiles, something's up there, and then you hear this impact, and it's strikingly authentic. Like, like they were
You
shooting
don't
at
think
something in
you'd
the
hear
sky.
about that though? Like,
It's
not that we hear anything
Yeah.
about stuff that goes on around the world
right.
of significance, but
Clyde Lewis talked about it on Ground Zero.
oh, did he?
Yeah.
So this was just like a town in Brazil or something, and they were firing off weapons into the sky.
I forget what city or town that was, but you know what we should do? We should play this video and talk about it on our next live stream, so we can share the video on YouTube.
Yeah, I think we are going to be doing that pretty soon. Should
Yeah.
we set a date right now?
That'll be fun. And we can play clips, live and people can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, we attempted, for those of you who went to our Hangout in the Hole last time, it was a little rough. I had video that was going, but Chris and John were frozen in time, and you couldn't see
People
much of the
still
interaction.
seem to enjoy it though.
I think it was still a fun conversation with our listeners, and we
Yeah.
had people calling in, which was cool.
It's way more loose.
Yeah,
Maybe a couple
topics,
clips.
bullet points.
And so interacting with people is fun, and we kind of just keep bouncing off
Yeah.
ideas off of each other, and it keeps going forward that way.
Yeah, so if you're interested in that, go to YouTube, our YouTube channel, Belief Hole Podcast, and then click the little bell and subscribe so that you get notified when we go live in case you missed the date.
And thanks to everyone who did that after our last call for YouTube subscribers.
Okay, so that would be June 5th. We will be doing a live stream podcast from 7 to whenever,
Yes.
Eastern Standard Time.
So join us, guys. Come into the hole with us.
Should be fun.
Oh my God. Anyway, let's move
Join
on quick
us in the
before
hole is what I
anybody
meant to
wraps
say.
their head around that phrase.
Holy crap. Moving on.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah. So yes, Breakaway Civilization, the secret space war. This is a fascinating topic, guys. I'm really excited about it. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Anyone that's followed any kind of alternative fringe ideas that align itself with UFOs, aliens, extraterrestrials, this concept that at some point in time, the shadowy hand behind the military and the governments of the world, or specifically the U.S. in this case for today, has been building an infrastructure of advanced technology that perhaps we're seeing in the skies today. We might call it UFOs, we might call it aliens. We don't know what it is, but there is something going on. There's something up there. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest, and there's whistleblowers that have come out and said that there is a parallel technological movement running alongside our U.S. military, alongside our government apparatus, that has its own separate agenda and organization and structures that are building out this parallel to our own with technology. Like you always hear, like,
So this isn't Space Force.
it is.
It is?
So that's one argument.
Yeah. Okay. So
They're going to bring it into the light more?
so here's a quick argument. This comes from the work of Dr. Michael Sala.
But Space Force is the modern day, like, what Trump is pushing.
Yeah, so this is where it depends on who you listen to. But Dr. Michael Sala, in his book, it's called like The Secret Space War and Space Force or something. I think it just came out fairly recently. His argument is that a long time ago, shortly after Eisenhower, the U.S. military, the Air Force specifically, was offered advanced technology to become the preeminent space force in the world. So the U.S. would have
Offered
dominance.
by whom? By extraterrestrials?
Extraterrestrial, intelligences that they were interacting with basically said, and corporations, Lockheed Martin, groups like that, promised this kind of advanced technology to the U.S. Air Force so they could dominate space, essentially, before any other country did. And supposedly, according to Michael Sala, recently, they've discovered, and this makes me think of like videos that have come out of like that massive ship that looks like it's feeding energy off the sun.
Oh, that's amazing.
The
the ship in the sun kind of thing?
Right. But there's a lot of things that have come out, and supposedly people inside the U.S. Air Force and other organizations have discovered that they've been lied to, that essentially the technology that was given to them by these corporate entities and maybe extraterrestrial entities and groups pale in comparison to really what's out there in space. So what they say essentially is that Dr. Michael Sala equates this to basically like them being promised to be the wardens of space, this like massive power in space and technological military power. And they're essentially like the Coast Guard, that's like hobbled. It's the small.
Right. What wasn't the idea that these corporations would offer their skills and knowledge to help the government develop this technology, but secretly they were developing it much faster on their own, just taking the government's money.
Exactly.
That was the reason, the motivation for working with the government in the first place.
Exactly. Black projects, secret government operations, secret black operations, the deep state of the military-industrial complex.
Right.
That's essentially what this is, creating an entire reality of technology, advanced craft that can, stop on a dime and spin in the sky, these triangular crafts that are, hundreds of years ahead of what we think is capable right now. But the idea that it could be a parallel breakaway civilization of our own.
Right.
That just had advanced technology and didn't share it with the rest of us.
Yeah, so let's get into some of the
Where
evidence.
free energy comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a huge part of it.
So a good place to start, I think, and a lot of this stuff people will be familiar with, but it's going to be a twist on it. And I thought a great place to start would be Kenneth Arnold, because we talked about him before.
It's Kevin Arnold.
Not the guy from
The Wonder Years.
Kenneth Arnold,
Winnie.
the Washingtonian who saw those 9 objects going by Mount Rainier when he was out. I think he was out on a reconnaissance mission. There was like a reward out for some downed aircraft.
Oh, really?
That's what he.
So was he working for the U.S. Air Force at the time?
No,
Kenneth Arnold?
no. I think he was just flying as a citizen when he came across that. But
So he coined the term flying saucer.
well, we're going to get into that right now.
Okay, let's do it, Chris.
The argument is, well, first of all, he never said flying saucer. And then what he saw was actually something that turned out to look a lot like something that Nazi Germany was developing years before.
Oh, right. Didn't he say something like they look like saucers skipping off?
Well, yeah. Well, John,
Okay.
do you want to start us off here?
John, there's a picture, by the way. What?
Oh, that right
This
there.
was taken from, I think, one of Corey Goode's personal satellites. Did you see this?
Yeah. One of
pretty
his
awesome.
personal satellites
See, I would join Space Force if we got to do stuff like that.
would get blown up in a spaceship.
It might be worth it if you get to go through a Stargate first.
Yeah, it
You're
looks like they're coming out of a Stargate portal.
battling
underwater.
draconian lizard men.
Chris,
Might be worth it.
you get scared when your fan turns off.
Why would I get scared? Oh,
It's so quiet.
it does get quiet.
I hate
That's because I'm
quiet.
left with my own thoughts, and that's much more terrifying than lizard people in space.
Like Space Force is fine.
As long as I'm not alone in the aircraft, I got an intercom that I can talk to my compatriots out there in space.
You guys are out
flying
there, right?
around.
Hello?
Bogey on the right.
Hello, where'd everyone go?
I'm frightened.
Okay.
Anyway,
All right.
I'm a courageous man.
All right, Kenneth Arnold, June 24th, 1947. Go for John.
The Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting occurred on June 24th, 1947, when Kenneth Arnold claimed that he saw a string of 9 shiny, unidentified flying objects flying past Mount Rainier at speeds that Arnold estimated at a minimum of 1,200 miles an hour. This was the first post-war sighting in the United States that garnered nationwide news coverage and is credited with being the first of the modern era of UFO sightings, including numerous reported sightings over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Arnold's description of the objects also led to the press coining the terms flying saucer and flying disc as popular descriptive terms for UFOs.
So that's where we get that term.
Ah, that's where it all began.
Right. But what's interesting about this is what I had mentioned previously was that the crafts that he saw were not circular,
Right.
100%.
They were wing-shaped, right?
Well, let's read the next part.
Okay.
here.
Years later, Arnold claimed he told Bill Bucket that, quote, they flew erratic, like a saucer if you skip it across the water.
So that's where the saucer name came in. So he never said they look like flying saucers. He said they moved like saucers skipping over water. So he wasn't describing the shape.
This is interesting. So he says, it says, Arnold felt that he had been misquoted since the description referred to the object's motion rather than their shape. Thus, Bucket has often been credited with first using flying saucer and supposedly misquoting Arnold. But the term does not appear in Bucket's early articles. Instead, his first article of June 25th says only, he said he sighted 9 saucer-like aircraft flying in formation. So yeah, who knows who first started that flying saucer?
Right, and this clears it up even more. The next day, in a much more detailed article, Bucket wrote, quote, he clung to his story of shiny, flat objects racing over the Cascade Mountains with a peculiar weaving motion, quote, like the tail of a Chinese kite. He also described the objects as saucer-like, in the way that a saucer would skip over the water, and their motion, quote, like fish flipping in the sun. He described the objects as, quote, flat like a pie pan and somewhat bat-shaped. So
Weird.
that's the key there, is the shape. Wasn't like a saucer.
So we got some pictures here. These are going to be in the show notes,
Yeah,
right, Chris?
can you show Arnold's description first, Jeremy? So this is what Arnold described to an illustrator. This craft.
Weird.
So that's what he saw. Not a circular flying disc. It looks sort of like a
crescent.
like a batarang, you know?
Yeah,
Batman
like a
kind of
crescent with a
Kind of
little...
looks like a stealth bomber a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's called the flying wing. That became the idea in? I think it started out in special projects and stuff, secret government development of that kind of craft, right? The flying wing. Was it?
Arnold saw this, right? 10 years before he saw that, Nazi Germany was developing this.
It does look futuristic even for
Weird.
now.
Look at that. Look how close that looks to that. That is, what's that called here? The HO 229 or something?
HO 229.
So Nazi Germany was building those and test flying them.
This was 10 years earlier?
10 years before, around 10 years before, Arnold had seen that crescent-shaped thing. So at a distance, if you see that thing...
That's huge, too.
And if you, for comparison, what most warplanes looked like at that time, click on the other image here.
Well, for our listeners, what we're looking at now, yeah, so this was developed by the Germans, right?
Right.
In the 30s, supposedly?
Yeah.
They were working on the technology, and it looks like, kind of like a boomerang almost that's, fairly straight. It's not super curved.
Kind of looks like a moth.
Yeah, it looks like like a moth. But it has that kind of V shape with a little itty bitty tail in the back, like very tiny. But it looks just like Kenneth Arnold's image that he
very similar.
Yeah, sketched later.
And so, for a comparison, I mean, anybody can Google this, but here's an example. This is called the P-47 Thunderbolt. This is what most aircraft during that time period looked like. So if you compare that to what Germany had built there, like look how much more advanced.
That's ridiculous.
And look how striking it is in comparison to what Kenneth Arnold saw.
Yeah, well, what we had at the time with that boat, the Thunderbolt,
Just
looks like a toy.
biplanes.
Yeah.
Looks like a little toy, and then this thing looks like an
Almost
advanced
looks like a stealth bomber.
elite
It does look
technology.
like a stealth bomber.
Yeah.
Right, which wasn't supposedly what developed until like the 80s or 90s or something.
Yeah, much
Guys,
later.
definitely go scroll in whatever app you're listening in and check out the pictures real quick so you get an idea.
Yeah,
of what
Well,
we're
click on
talking
a link to our show notes on our website, and we'll have all the pictures listed there. Yeah, these are pretty incredible.
Anyways, I thought it was kind of fascinating because I've never heard that side of Kenneth Arnold's experience. You always hear he saw flying saucers from outer space.
But that actually didn't come from him. Interesting.
Right, so that's just kind of the first little anecdote that kind of points to the possibility of breakaway civilization from our own devising.
Right. Okay, so let's go back. Let's get to the beginning of kind of where the supposed interaction with ET began when it comes to the U.S. government and extraterrestrial life or extraterrestrial intervention, allegedly. Okay, so that's going to take us back to Eisenhower. So for anyone who knows the lore, you may be familiar with the concept of Eisenhower having secret meetings with E.T.
Yeah,
right?
That's always fun.
Yeah, and some would suggest, and I think this might come from more of the Corey Goode bent, the specificity of it being the Nordics, right? These tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, almost magical, like benevolent entities, because they're supposed to be benevolent, right? The Nordics.
Right, they're the good guys.
Yeah. But regardless, there's evidence to suggest, and we'll get to a really interesting whistleblower down the road here about his specific testimony of what happened. So some of it's conjecture, but there's some interesting, incredible witness testimony coming up here that there was some kind of reality to this. Oh, and I will say to set this up, Eisenhower disappeared for one day, and Dr. Michael Salla and others, some whistleblowers he's brought forward, are suggesting that it was during this day, this time period, that this secret base was shut down for a period of 3 days. And in those 3 days, Eisenhower was whisked away under the cover of losing a dental filling and had to go for an emergency dental appointment. Instead, he actually went to the, I think it might have been Edwards Air Force Base, to meet with the extraterrestrials.
Sounds like a better way to spend your afternoon.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and, Chris, read a bit from this here.
All right.
This comes from Dr. Michael Salla's book called U.S. Air Force Secret Space Program.
In the late afternoon hours of February 20th, 1954, while on a vacation to Palm Springs, California, President Eisenhower went missing and did not reappear until the next morning. Whistleblowers allege that he was secretly brought to Edwards Air Force Base for a sensitive meeting which was never reported. Officially, when the president showed up the next morning at a church service in Los Angeles, reporters were told that he had simply been taken for an emergency dental treatment the previous evening. The disappearance fueled rumors that Eisenhower was using the fictitious dentist visit as a cover story for a highly classified event which took place at a nearby military facility.
Salla goes on to claim, this clandestine engagement is possibly the most significant that any American president could conduct. An alleged first contact meeting with human-looking extraterrestrials at a U.S. Air Force base to negotiate the country's nuclear weapons program, technological assistance from the Galactic Federation, and officially disclosing the truth about the Nordic visitors.
Okay, so you get some of those keywords there, like Galactic Federation.
Yeah.
That may come from Corey Goode, which is, as we'll get into in the expansion, he's a lot more controversial of a figure, I think a lot less reputable, but we'll get into that.
He doesn't have any hard evidence, really. It's a lot of really good stories. And we'll get into the ins and outs of that towards the end and then into the expansion.
Right. And the point of all this, too, is when we do get into the Corey Goode stuff and the stuff that is more controversial, like as far as his credibility goes, he is mixed in a lot, especially with Sal's work, with other maybe more reputable sources. And it's difficult because, there's that argument where he could be the turd in the punch bowl. It could be the guy that's, stinking up the casserole because his information...
Don't put turd and casserole in the same paragraph.
But he's got information that if he isn't legit, then it's easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
These are a lot of cliches I'm using, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I was going to ask when you kind of brought this up, was there any evidence to point to this secret meeting?
Yeah, I'm going to get to it here.
Okay.
So some of Dr. Michael Salla, he loves his circumstantial evidence. He like with the Stargate episode we did, he had a lot of circumstantial evidence points. But this is a piece here. Edwards Air Force Base was closed for 3 days during the period Eisenhower's Palm Springs visit. Renowned UFO researcher Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens wrote about the base closure.
A number of researchers and former military personnel confirmed that the base was closed to all servicemen who tried to enter or leave. That is interesting. Events of tremendous national security must have been occurring for Edwards to be suddenly closed without any prior warning to base personnel.
Okay, so this is right at the same time when Eisenhower mysteriously disappears. And there was another whistleblower, I don't think I have it here, but it was an ambulance worker at the base who said that they were preparing essentially for Eisenhower to be there.
Oh, that is interesting. Well, I mean, that base would be the base to go to because I'm thinking of Wright Pat. But Edwards is also in UFO lore as a place for...
It's a hot spot for sure.
Right, yeah.
Okay, another whistleblower named Bill Holden revealed his own research into the closure of Edwards Air Force Base during Eisenhower's top secret 1954 visit.
Quote, now history says that this is where he met the ETs and that an agreement was signed between the U.S. and the ETs. And as far as that, a mothership was seen coming in. There were a number of UFOs coming in. And the base was literally shut down for 3 days. I have been able to find that the base was shut down for 3 days. I've been able to find in civilian records, newspaper accounts, and everything else as far as those facts were validated.
Okay, so those are kind of some whistleblowers or actually more just people doing research into, let's see, Eisenhower disappears, the nearby base was closed down. Another whistleblower testifies that he was an ambulance worker stationed at the base and they were preparing for him to be there. And another person said that like a reporter for Los Angeles Times or something had tried to get access to the base and was refused it. There's a lot of information in this that we'll link in the book that you can read deeper into this that corroborates that. But this is the interesting one to me because this is an actual eyewitness testimony of a document relating to this incident that proves that at least there was some documentation or something
that there was, in fact, a meeting between Eisenhower and extraterrestrials?
Or at least an invitation,
Ooh.
Whether or not there was a meeting. Unless this is a CIA piece of disinfo that this former congressman was meant to see.
So is that where this document's coming from? It's a former House of Representatives guy, right?
Yeah, I'm about to mention that here. Yeah, former State Representative Henry W. McElroy, while serving in New Hampshire's State Federal Relations and Veteran Affairs Committee, was witness to a secret brief prepared for Eisenhower, informing him of an ET presence and inviting him to meet.
That's pretty substantial there.
Yeah, so this is a guy, he was a former state representative. I think he actually might have been behind trying to get his state to coin money based off gold and silver or something like that. He was like a kind of an anti-centrist, an anti-globalist in a sense. But he was a legit guy. And he came out with this testimony, I think maybe inspired by Dr. Greer and all those people coming out.
That's interesting.
He was inspired by John Glenn and other astronauts who supposedly were coming out, with witnessing this kind of stuff, because he thought the world should know. And so I have a clip here, John, if you want to play it, in his own words, describing the document that he had witnessed. So this is Dr. Henry McElroy.
Good name.
Former state representative of New Hampshire.
The document I saw was an official brief to President Eisenhower. To the best of my memory, this brief was pervaded with a sense of hope, and it informed President Eisenhower of the continued presence of extraterrestrial beings here in the United States of America. The brief seemed to indicate that a meeting between the President and some of these visitors could be arranged as appropriate if desired. The tone of the brief indicated to me that there was no need for concern, since these visitors were in no way causing any harm or had any intention whatsoever of causing any disruption then or in the future. While I can't verify the times or places or that any meeting or meetings occurred directly between Eisenhower and these visitors, because of his optimism in his farewell address in 1961, I personally believe that Eisenhower did indeed meet with these extraterrestrial off-world astronauts. I hope my personal testimony will aid the nation in its quest for continued enlightenment. I am honored to follow in the footsteps of those who have come forward with their personal testimonies, those who deserve the admiration of the American people for sharing their accounts.
Yeah. Well, good on him.
Yeah.
Good on him for speaking out. I mean, that's got to be kind of a ballsy move.
Well, that's the thing is like, you know, this is a former state representative, right? And he's obviously getting older. And this is something that it seems pretty genuine that he witnessed, this brief he came across. And now this is an invitation. Hey, come meet with these benevolent aliens. You know, they're not going to hurt us. They're only good.
He almost made it sound like, again, like it wasn't, he said astronauts.
Yeah, I think just because they're in
at
space.
that time,
he said they were extraterrestrial. But then again, yeah, I wonder how much of that is actually in there. Because there's a lot of this where people assume that they're extraterrestrial, but there's not necessarily a lot of evidence to suggest that.
Although if it were going to be a group meeting with Eisenhower, I mean, that brief seemed to suggest that it was extraterrestrial, not just an offshoot organization of some kind.
Well, that was at least his interpretation of that. Well, this could be where the beginning of the Breakaway Civilization starts.
Yeah.
In our modern time.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole Breakaway Civilization thing, it could coincide with meetings for the first time, first contact, you know?
So like one of the things he said in that was, you know, he thinks that this may have taken place. He thinks it does because of the optimism in Eisenhower's farewell address, right? And Eisenhower went on to, I think it was after this supposed memo that he announced the peace through particles or something, where he started the dismantling of atomic weapons. Supposedly, this was maybe one of the impetus if he had this meeting with these, you know, extraterrestrials or whatever.
Impetus.
That's a possibility.
That would make sense.
But interesting to kind of peg this as a beginning point to where we forked off in technology, where we started, maybe we were given certain, but what's crummy about that is it's just for the elite. I mean, it's just for these, you know, is it really helping us? Is it helping the people of Earth?
Well, I think it seems to me like there's a good chance that Eisenhower was fooled in this alleged alliance because, there seems like there's a lot of potential for doing good in the world if this technology were distributed, and yet it's still being kept under the cloak of darkness, you know?
And how many wars and just all sorts of things go on because of these secrets?
Because of a lack of energy.
What's really going on?
More than just energy. It just seems like, I mean, you know, even things with like the coronavirus, you know, whatever you want to say about the virus itself, they're always going to be using circumstances and situations
to grab power.
I don't know if there's anything directly related, but when there's these massive scale sort of programming, social engineering that they use when these events happen.
Propaganda.
Yeah, it's just like you wonder how much it, like, is there anything related to this, you know, with disclosure or anything else?
What's that popular phrase, never let a good...
Yeah, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
By Eric Holder.
Yeah.
Obama's...
Oh, that's right.
Secretary of Milkshakes or something. I forget what he did.
I think he was Attorney General.
Yeah, I think that's right. Is there guys out there in the world? Let us know. We didn't know last time we talked about that, actually. And I think I said like Secretary of State, which was wrong. I think it was Attorney General.
While you're making your other point.
Okay. Oh yeah. I wasn't going to bring this up, but
yeah, Attorney General, you're right.
We don't have to get on a topic because, you know, on the Hangout and stuff, we'll talk about what's going on in the world right now with Corona and all this crazy stuff. But there's this kind of interesting idea that I had that was just like, you hear about this idea of Project Bluebeam, where they want to, you know, get the world united under one world government, and the best way to do that would be to scare. You know, Ronald Reagan. I sometimes think what would happen if we were threatened by an outside, you know, extraterrestrial force.
Great quote from him coming up.
Right. So there's
they chose a pandemic instead.
Right. Well, here's the question: could this be a rollout, a pre-Project Bluebeam rollout, to see how we would deal with a world catastrophe?
Right.
You know, just to see like, would we respond to government saying stay at home and stay safe? If maybe the next move could be, it's aliens.
or
stay at home.
I feel like they don't even need one though.
Yeah.
You know, like at this point, I feel like they could have gone either way. But, you know, if anyone that really believes that there is this sort of secret cabal that sort of programs where our society goes over long periods of time,
right,
which is
engineers catastrophes,
and they, well, even if they don't engineer them, they wait for them to happen, and then they
use it, take advantage of it.
They respond in a way that they have already planned. And you know, for most of the people in this truth conspiracy community, they've known these events happen,
right,
and they've been waiting for, you know, a lot of people talk about Project Bluebeam, waiting for that to happen, waiting for this next big event where they continuously push their totalitarian.
Agenda 21.
Exactly. And it seems like this was a really good way to use it.
Yeah.
You know, it's so much better than an alien invasion because people are united with the effort.
Right.
You know, it's like,
that's a good point.
It's just, if you were a bad guy and you were going to make a plan to like escalate this down the road, a pandemic is the perfect opportunity to do that.
Because you've policed yourself out of fear.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
What's the thing? Yeah, this, you know, obviously people are suffering and it's a sickness, and the best way to use that is to scare the shit out of people about it and to make them, you know, how can we push this as far as possible, and what kind of liberties can we get them to give up?
Right.
You know. And that's kind of, I mean, who knows where we're at with that, you know, with the specific.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a side trail, but it's hard to, you know, when you get into Project Bluebeam or whatever, it seems like these are massive global events that can change the face of
that have been predicted.
History, yeah.
You know, they've been predicted by whistleblowers and, you know, even elites that have spoken out and just said like,
this is what's coming.
Yeah, this is what we'd like to do. Orwell stuff. You know. Anyways, yeah, this is a little off topic, but, you know, it touches on what's happening in the world right now, just when it comes to like, you know,
well, yeah, and it's hard not to talk about this stuff too. I mean, it's very present what's going on lately. But I would like to take a break.
Yeah.
But before we do, I just want to say, how exciting would that be if you were walking by a desk and you're working somewhat in relation to the president, you see a memo that says something like that. You just happen to catch a glance of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think this was years later, and they were reviewing documents that during the Eisenhower administration.
Yeah.
It wasn't, he didn't work for Eisenhower, I don't believe. He was in a...
It'd been funny if they had like requirements of like what he had to wear when he met them, like how he had to perform, you know?
Yeah,
like, you must wear these
items.
items.
It's one of those things too where like it could be that this document was slipped into everything else by the CIA or some kind of disinformation campaign.
There's always
so
that
many
possibility.
Levels, you know, when you get into these like high level, you know, whatever you want to call them.
Right.
It's just like,
clearance
how do
stuff.
you know?
Yeah, how do you know what's real? It always goes back to trusting
Even his
sources.
testimony could be, you know, a way to
and to me, it's like
alter the consciousness.
We talked about this a long time ago when it comes to like Bob Dean, right? I love that guy from Project Camelot. You know, there are people that you watch long enough and you can get this twinkle of authenticity in their eye, and that's kind of what it has to come down to. Because at the end of the day, we're listening to officials, we're listening to whistleblowers. You can corroborate it with what's going on and make parallels and connections, but at the end of the day, like, you have to, there's some level of like, who do you trust?
Right.
And
And
why?
you have to, that's a skill that develops over time too. You know, like being able to read people.
Right.
And
And some people are just not good at it.
Yeah,
some
some
people are
people
just
aren't.
not good at reading people. You know, that's why there's a lot of gullible
you
people
can get
out
tricked
there.
by people too that
all the time,
you know,
yeah.
that definitely are actors and good at acting, but there is something within really genuine people that people usually drawn to people like that over time.
That's why some people have an issue with Corey.
Right, and I understand that.
A lot of stuff in the eyes.
See, I got into him at the very beginning and I was excited about the information, so I didn't, and it was so new. I was just like, yes, this has to be real.
Right.
But, you know, as time has gone on, there's a lot more
a lot of questions for sure.
Well, that'll be interesting. Yeah, we're going to get into more of Corey Goode. We're going to talk about him a little bit.
Still a fascinating, fun story, though.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're going to get into the beginning of his stuff, I think, at the end of this episode, and then probably more of the controversy and the weird, crazy stuff in the expansion.
Yeah, for sure.
That's probably how
Give you little tasters.
Yeah, but there's still a lot of interesting stuff coming up in this episode, a lot of disclosure and evidence of the Breakaway Civilization and the secret space war. So, guys, stick around after the break. We're going to get into some interesting stuff. So
buckle up and get in your craft. We're going to go for a ride.
And have a flush. We'll see you in a minute.
We'll be back. What?
Flush. Wow, way to take a really good exit into the break and turn it into a weird.
I was trying to figure out what I could do to get John to stop himself and say, what?
Well, you did a good job.
Worked.
Thank you. Success.
All right, we'll be back.
Pick up!
Hi. Thanks for calling the Belief Hole
Thank
Hotline.
God.
Got a spooky story?
I do. It's all real. They're outside
No one's available to take your call, but you can leave your story at the sound of the tone.
No.
Thanks for calling.
They're outside right now.
Have a spooky
They're outside. No.
Do you have a spooky story? Don't wait until it's too late. Give us a call. BeliefHole.com.
And we're back.
Welcome back.
All right. I'm excited about this next part. I just thought this was interesting because this is a presidential diary entry that does kind of give some credence to the idea of a breakaway civilization. And this is why.
Oh, okay.
So this was from Reagan's presidential diary in 1985. Does anybody want to read this? Who can do a Reagan? Can you do a Reagan?
I don't really know what he sounds like.
He sounds like this.
That's not bad, actually.
Maybe you should
Kind of
do
like a
it.
Christian Slater, but breathier.
Lunch with the top 5 space scientists.
That's like Reagan mixed with like a creep.
It was fascinating. Space truly.
Is that the... Why don't you
close
do
enough.
it?
I'll try.
Lunch with 5 top scientists. It was fascinating. Space truly is the frontier, the last
You
frontier.
sound like the bad guy from Batman.
That's what I was thinking.
What? The Joker?
No. Yeah, some villain.
Do it again. We'll figure out what villain you are.
I'll just read it normal. Lunch with 5 space scientists. It was fascinating. Space truly is the last frontier, and some of the developments there in astronomy, etc., are like science fiction, except they are real. I learned that our shuttle capacity is such that we could orbit 300 people. Okay, why that's interesting is because at the time, NASA's space shuttle program had a maximum of 11 people per shuttle, and only 5 were built for space flight.
Oh, weird.
So you do the numbers there, and
55?
so 55 astronauts, but that's the capacity we knew of at the time.
But he knew of
But
apparently.
he's saying 300 astronauts. How many shuttles? And then Michael Salla alleges, if you're orbiting 300 people, you need space stations. What space stations are out there that could handle that payload of human beings?
Well, especially in 85.
In 1985, right. I mean, we stopped going to the moon
So your
decades
argument is
before.
that Reagan is hinting at a it's kind of a breakaway civilization idea, right?
A potentiality that there were shuttles and space programs going on that were out of the purview of the American public.
Ooh,
So
interesting.
it wasn't included in at least the disclosed NASA.
Perhaps some
stuff.
off-world officers?
Right, and that takes us to Gary McKinnon, which we talked about before. I don't know, John, I don't know if you remember that or not, but it was a guy who had hacked into the Pentagon and several other intelligence agency offices, hacked into all these computers, allegedly had caused millions of dollars worth of damage, quote unquote. So they were trying to extradite him
When was this?
from London, early 2000s.
Huh. I've heard his name before.
Really fascinating stuff.
He was the first hacker to be, the U.S. government tried to extradite.
Exactly.
Right?
And for what? For looking for evidence of extraterrestrial life.
Well, he hacked into the government.
Well, I know,
Pentagon,
obviously,
and Area 51.
right.
But he did it. Is it going to explain how he did it in here? I watched an interview with him, and he was saying how essentially, like, for the password, he put in password in the network settings. That's how secure the Department of Defense was.
Wow.
No way.
Yeah.
What?
Because it's just a network, and he somehow pinged the network, and then it asked for an admin password, and he put in the default, and they just didn't
Wow.
set it up. Like Area 51, the Pentagon, wherever he was able to hack.
Wow, maybe there is some credibility to just more
Stupidity.
Yeah,
or
incompetence.
incompetence.
Yeah, it's like they want you to find it. Maybe that's the conspiracy.
So they tried to get him extradited, but what was so interesting was what he had claimed to discover in there. So he had spent 2
Right.
years trying to get into these places to prove the existence of extraterrestrial life. Which, what a cool objective! What a cool agenda as a hacker. Like that's your agenda.
You're like, I'm a hacker from X-Files.
right,
You know?
right, lone gunman or something. So this comes from a Wired interview that he did
With Gary McKinnon.
with Gary McKinnon.
A NASA photographic expert said that there was a Building 8 at Johnson Space Center where they regularly airbrushed out images of UFOs from the high-resolution satellite imaging. I logged on to NASA and was able to access this department.
Access granted.
They had huge, high-resolution images stored in their picture files. They had filtered and unfiltered or processed and unprocessed files.
Okay, this is fascinating because I have coming up here testimony from her,
from the woman who worked as a contractor for NASA, where her colleague admitted to her that they regularly airbrush out. So that's what he's referencing. It's Building 8.
Wow, so he heard that story and then he hacked in to find that and
That's
actually
crazy.
found it.
We'll play that.
Go Gary.
One other thing that tips me off here to this, there's some authenticity to this, is that he describes the high resolution images, right? More high res than we had, that the public had at the time, the capability. They were massive images with crystal clear imaging. Some of these images were supposedly taken, before we landed on the moon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they were supposed to be like super high def.
Well, the one that he saw, he thought was potentially from a satellite above the craft, looking down at this sort of, well, he'll explain what it looks like here.
All right, so he continues. My dial-up 56K connection was very slow trying to download one of those picture files. As this was happening, I had remote control of their desktop, and by adjusting it to 4-bit color and low screen resolution, I was able to briefly see one of these pictures. It was a silvery, cigar-shaped object with geodesic spheres on either side. There were no visible seams or riveting. There was no reference to the size of the object, and the picture was taken presumably by a satellite looking down on it. The object didn't look man-made or anything like what we have created.
Yeah, so that to me sounds like a sort of space station or base station or some, with the two geodesic domes on either side.
Mm-hmm.
What is a geodesic dome?
I am picturing a globe-like, maybe like a almost full globe on either side. What does geodesic mean? I should know. There you go.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was
Remember
picturing. Biodome with Pauly Shore?
Mm-hmm.
That's a geodesic dome.
So yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's built out of this grid sort of pattern.
It's
It's
like
kind of
triangles?
built up with polygons or triangles. Yeah.
Okay. Like the Epcot Center.
all right, and then it continues on. Oh, this is interesting. This part's really fascinating. And it kind of goes back to Reagan's quote about the capacity to have 300 people in space at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, I also got access to Excel spreadsheets. One was titled, quote, non-terrestrial officers. It contained names and ranks of U.S. Air Force personnel who are not registered anywhere else. It also contained information about ship-to-ship transfers, but I've never seen the names of these ships noted anywhere else. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's highly specific. I mean, that's the thing too, is like if Gary McKinnon's legit, which he seems to me, I've seen him in interviews, we'll link one in the show notes,
Yeah.
but if he's legit, then either there's one of two things going on. One, he actually found this information about non-terrestrial officers with the specific information about ship-to-ship transfers and things like that. There is definitely Breakaway Civilization. Or the odd thing that the security was so vulnerable and was so easily hacked and accessible that maybe some of this information was supposed to get out. There's
I don't
always
know.
that
That
possibility.
seems like a high level of coincidences for it to accidentally get out there.
It's a honeypot. You put the information out there that Building 8 is the place to look based on the previous whistleblower. He goes and looks there. The door is unlocked.
You
He
have to
goes
hope
in.
there's a hacker out there that's just wanting to find proof of extraterrestrials and who's really good at hacking
Well,
and
wouldn't
who has the courage to hack government installations.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
But it is a possibility.
Gary comes to the rescue.
I remember hearing, do you know what happened to him?
Because
they were trying to extradite him forever.
Yeah.
And
From Britain, right?
I forget what year it was, but they decided not to let us take him and try him. The Home Secretary or whoever over there in Britain said
Okay.
he was obviously seriously ill and had
really?
depression. Well, he
Reminds
was,
me of Julian Assange.
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know if seriously ill is a good way to describe him because he had Asperger's.
Oh, okay.
And he did have depression. He was battling depression. But to me, that almost makes him more sincere. So basically, I just thought those were a couple more interesting points that kind of point to a possibility of this sort of breakaway civilization we've been talking about. There's a lot of stuff we're going to skip in this episode that you can really get into, like the development of the technologies, a lot of the whistleblowing and documents that relate to this, things like electrogravitics, which is fascinating. There's stuff about the Byfield-Brown effect. John, I think you might be familiar with that. Electrostatic stuff we talked about off the air a little bit.
Well, there's the idea that you
electrically charge
anti-gravity-like effects using static electricity,
Okay.
electromagnetics.
Well, it was super fascinating stuff. We're not going to get into the aurora stuff or the flying triangles.
You know what I just realized? We could do this show forever.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff.
Don't
man.
worry, guys. We're not going anywhere. We have a ton
There's
to
a lot of the stuff
explore.
that I want to go back and do deeper dives on
Yeah,
aspects to
I'm
this
sure,
breakaway stuff. There's so much out there, especially when you get into Richard Dolan's
You could
work.
take one of these topics and probably break it down.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. Man. You could just do
Just Byfield-Brown effect.
Yeah.
And how that relates to gravity.
Yeah.
and how it shows that gravity's not real and it's really a static charge.
Not, well, yeah.
Gravity's real.
Well,
Agree to disagree.
the feeling of gravity is real.
Yeah, it's a real effect.
But none of us are quantum physicists, mathematicians, so.
Well, none of us are government agents, but we're.
That's why I never say something is for sure not real.
Well,
or
it
real.
doesn't have to.
I didn't say it's not
You
for
say,
sure.
well, gravity's not real.
I'm saying that because I've bit my tongue this whole time. I haven't said anything about the flat Earth. I'm entertaining this entire thing. Should get some credit for that without having to say.
You're right. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Did you want to add anything?
That's it. Not that the Earth is flat. I'm just saying.
Jeremy, just tell what you believe.
I feel that a lot of this could be not what we think it is.
So Jeremy doesn't believe in space.
No, that's not true.
I love that when
That's
you
a
were
misnomer.
talking about this at the introduction of this episode. You're like, and maybe not extraterrestrials. Maybe it's
could be-
all
it could be inner Earth.
inner Earth.
Yeah.
But you always have to.
I'm not saying because of flat Earth. I'm just saying
Because it goes against his belief
if you
system.
keep
I
saying
know.
aliens, extraterrestrials.
I said both. Potentially.
I know. So I said, but as soon as I say they might, it could be inner Earth, it could be breakaway civilization. You say, oh, here we go.
Jeremy, do you
He's
think
talking
it's
about flat Earth.
possible that
Code word for flat didn't Earth.
Do
happen?
you think it's possible that it could not be flat, but also
Yeah.
not round? So it's something different than round.
I think it could be round and much larger than we think. I think it could be flat.
That's
I think it
possible.
could be.
It's just the numbers seem to
simulation.
be not quite accurate as
That's
far
the
as how they measure.
That's the primary point. I'm not saying it's flat. I like to get your guff a little, but I think
What else is
what's
odd?
interesting is the numbers don't match up with the curve. That's one of the most interesting things.
We
to
don't
me.
seem to be spinning at 1,000 miles an hour around in circles.
There's a lot of things that don't seem to make sense.
Yeah, because that's the one that really gets me, because I've heard people break that down, and there's just so many things about that just seem so not fully, they don't make sense.
Right. We'll save this for another episode on this topic.
I know. We'll probably get some hate mail for this one.
Yeah, just for mentioning it.
Well, I would like to do a flat Earth kind of episode.
Yeah, we should-
Where
we
we
should
really look
update
at the
that.
research on both
It's only
sides.
fair.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the secret space program and like going to Mars and Corey Goode battling lizard people and Venus 4. We could talk about the flat Earth on another episode.
We did. Well, we might as well do an update, because we did archive that episode at this point. So
Our very
Episode
first
1.
episode, yeah. I was pretty on fire about it back in the day.
That's a fun episode. That was our pretty loosey-goosey.
yeah.
There's a lot of fire
it
in
is
that
now strictly
conversation.
for patrons.
Yeah, if you want to hear our first, handful of episodes, you can go to our website and you can find them there. But yeah, you do have to be a patron to enjoy them. So
Anyway, you're on. Game on. Well, let's have a debate. I'll be on the mainstream science side, and even though I'm not really.
yeah, are you guys out there interested to hearing us debate the flat Earth and its possible realities of the shape of the Earth and
Or do you want Jeremy to
the
go
nature of
jump
our
off
home?
a flat corner?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of anger and vitriol on this topic. I just think it's fun to talk about.
Absolutely. I agree. Everything's fun to talk about to a degree.
To a degree.
No, I mean, flat Earth for sure. I don't think there's any harm in discussing that. I think it's way overblown that it's a dangerous topic.
All right.
But moving on, one thing I would wish we were getting into today, but it'll be a future episode, the whole Vril Society stuff when it comes to the Breakaway Civilization. That plays a key role. And actually, we'll probably get into that into the Corey Goode expansion.
We're going to talk about the Vril Society?
It's going to play a role.
Ooh, okay. But we should do an episode on that for the regular
Yeah,
listeners.
absolutely.
It's fascinating.
We will.
All right, so to move on here, let's look at some interesting quotes that have come out. I think people out there may be familiar with the quote from Ben Rich. Are you familiar with Ben Rich?
Mm-mm.
Ben Rich is known as the father of stealth technology. He worked at the famous Skunk Works department of Lockheed Martin. He was the second director.
Oh, they were at Area 51.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
I knew that.
Partnered with the Central Intelligence Agency.
That makes sense. He was a director of Lockheed's Skunk Works from 1975 to 1991. So he would give these speeches, these lectures a lot, right? And I have a link on here to a website that was kind of skeptical about this argument for this quote being real and not just tongue-in-cheek. But I think there's an argument to be made that it was real.
Well, what is it?
So the quote is, you guys may have heard of this, is something to the effect of, "We have the technology to take ET home." And then he would end his lecture saying that with a slide of like a UFO going through the clouds, right? And so the idea was that it was tongue-in-cheek, right? Because he
Right.
worked for this secret organization that, or they developed secret technology that we couldn't know about for the military and the government. The skeptical argument was that, he started his lectures around this time. E.T. by Steven Spielberg blew up as a popular film. And so, we have technology to take E.T.
It's like
home.
a cultural reference.
It's kind of like a fun thing to say. But then, he did believe in extraterrestrial life. He had talked to other people and made certain statements. And
Well, even if he was referencing the film, why would you make the statement that you could bring an alien back?
well, there's even more interesting statements. So this comes from Tom Keller. He was an aerospace engineer that worked as a computer systems analyst for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And in May 2010, he wrote an issue of MUFON UFO Journal. So that's interesting. This guy worked for Jet Propulsion Laboratory, also writes for MUFON,
Yeah.
Mutual UFO Network. Right?
There's often a lot of overlap with people working in these fields.
That's the thing too.
And
These
being
are
interested in the topic.
people who don't know that much about the real UFO history and lore. They think that especially if they don't believe in UFOs and aliens, they think that all these people are just wackos and nut jobs that are just peering in from the outside. But a lot of these people are former NASA employees.
Right,
People that worked at Jet Propulsion Laboratory and worked for the government. Anyways, so he was writing about this particular lecture that Ben Rich was giving. And he was there with Jan Harzen.
Oh, Jan.
And this was a lecture from 1993 at UCLA. So the controversial statements that Ben Rich made at that time were, of course, like I said, we now have the technology to take ET home, right? Now, after that, Harzan and some other engineers followed Ben Rich and pressed him further on this topic. And so he said after that, in response, after asking him more questions, he told one engineer, allegedly, we now know how to travel to the stars. We found an error in the equations, and it won't take a lifetime to do it. Another version of this quote would be, first, you have to understand that we will not get to the stars using chemical propulsion. Second, we have to devise a new propulsion technology. What we have to do is find out where Einstein went wrong.
Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have it. It sounds like
right, and that comes
looking
from
for it.
That comes from the Skeptical magazine. Now, what's interesting is there is a follow-up here. This comes from Richard Dolan's work.
Oh, he's the best.
We'll have this linked in the show notes too.
By the way, listeners out there, he's kind of the go-to guy when it comes to the research into Breakaway Civilization,
secret space program,
and the history with the government entanglement in black projects.
Right. So these are kind of Ben Richards' scare statements that Richard Dolan presents, and this comes to him by way of a guy by the name of Bill McDonald, who was mutual friends with him, and a guy named John Andrews. So according to Andrews, Ben Rich stated that the public must never be told the true reality of what's going on in relation to UFOs and extraterrestrials. The truth, Rich said, was too unbelievable, too intense, too powerful, too dramatic, too frustrating.
Too frightening.
Too
frustrating.
That's a little difference there. I know, I kind of ended with a whimper there when I said it. Too frightening.
That's scary.
So that's interesting, right?
What's double scary about that to me is that Richard Dolan always...
Double scary?
Double scary. It's a Dolan double scare.
Dolan double scare.
Is that Richie Dolan, he always background checks people that are coming to him and telling him these stories. So if this guy... Bill McDonald said that he was friends with Ben Rich, then Dolan confirmed that.
We're probably being used as like cattle in some way.
Oh, it's very possible.
We are not at the top of the food chain like we think we are.
Right. I mean, fed on and...
Well, probably a million different things, you know? I mean, if it translates to any of the other stuff we talk about, used for energy, the way that we seem to always be stressed out purposely, scared purposefully.
Right.
You know?
Talking about the old adrenochrome.
Yeah,
old adrenochrome.
It probably is always like everything else. When it's at these levels, there's a lot of reasons, you know?
If there is some sort of clandestine operation that just plucks people off our planet for weird purposes around the galaxy, I wonder what kind of jobs you could get. Like, I mean, probably, you know, slave.
Space janitor?
But like, if you're like an enslaved like jester in some like alien court, that'd be kind of fun.
Maybe you could run a podcast.
On like an alien planet. Like there's an alien planet that really loves Belief Hole. And like one day they're just going to take us. It kind of like, what was that great movie?
They're really interested in like Bigfoot. Like we know aliens are real, but...
It's like Galaxy Quest. What a great movie. Reminds me of that movie.
They're like, set up a studio and start broadcasting.
We need to know more about the Snellygaster.
Anyways, yeah, that, so that does give it more credence to me. I mean, anything that Richard Dolan
definitely
does.
a little scary.
For sure.
But not unsurprising.
It's a Dolan double scare.
And related
to
that...
it's double scary.
You know, but related to that quote about someone in the know, in the business, working at Skunk Works, giving that quote, I came across a quote from Michael Sala's work, and I'll give the name of the book in the show notes and at the end, but this is the quote. The feasibility of anti-gravity aircraft was enthusiastically embraced by executives from major aerospace companies. George S. Trimble, Vice President of Aviation and Advanced Propulsion Systems for Glenn Martin Aircraft, which was merged in 1995 into Lockheed Martin Company, which is, you know, who you just referenced, told the Associated Press in 1955, quote, unlimited power, freedom from gravitational attraction, and infinitely short travel time are now becoming feasible. That's a pretty bold statement in 1955.
Infinitely short travel time.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That means like extremely short.
Well, infinitely short is different than extremely. Infinitely?
Well, I guess if you take it literally.
Does that
in
mean
context,
it's always progressing smaller?
In that context,
yeah, literally.
Infinitely shorter would mean it's always getting faster.
And by like exponential amounts.
Exponential amounts, yeah. So
if he's being like scientific there.
Right.
Right. And not just being flamboyant with his words.
Right.
Well, it could reference something that Dolan talks about too, which is the trans atmospheric craft, TAC or something like that.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Where they fly in the upper atmosphere. And we have a clip coming up here, John, later that we're going to play that shows these things that are hidden in the night
These
sky.
are amazing. These are truly, I mean,
is V-shaped craft in the night sky. There are all kinds of things. If you can get yourself a pair of
they're invisible
night
to the
vision
naked eye.
goggles or a night vision telescope, you can see a world happening above us. That
It looks like Futurama. Like with these infrared or night vision goggles or night vision camera lenses, which by the way, I looked into buying one, but it's like $8,000. It's a little out of my price range. But
you can get for like $600. You can get, I think, a decent like singular.
You can get a pair of the binoculars for $200. I don't know how great they work.
Yeah, I don't feel
But basically, the idea is you look up into the sky with these night vision apparatusi, and you're right. There's a world of activity of craft that you can't see unless you're wearing those.
What?
Yeah, it's mind blowing. Some of these videos are really intense.
We could jump to that right now if you want to see it now.
How is that even? So this is just going on all the time?
That's the idea. There's a guy who has a YouTube channel who documents a lot of this stuff. We're going to look at the show
I'd like
notes.
to see one.
We could jump to that and then we go back to a couple more whistleblower stuff.
Let's
All right,
see that.
Let's follow our bliss, huh?
Check this
Follow
out.
our excitement.
Click on see full show notes in the link there on your podcast app, and
It'll take you to our webpage where we'll have this linked in the show notes. This is the triangle. Okay, so this is hidden tech in the night sky is where I have it, John, in the show notes.
two links, two blue links.
So yeah, I highlighted it in blue. You should see the highlight. There it is. Okay. Now, should I read the part before you?
Just do what you need to do.
Okay, let me do
So this is the triangle.
And just for a little preface to the triangle, you guys have all heard of this black craft, right? The black triangular craft, the V wings that people see flying, floating silently above them.
Is that the TR-3B? The alleged code name for that Aurora project, right? The
Right.
dark
It's a
project.
secret project, the stealth creation that we may have created. A lot of people think they're UFOs. But
Maybe
you
the
think
Phoenix Lights
the
craft.
Phoenix Lights, right? This black massive craft, triangular shape that can float silently at low altitudes, can also zip away at light speeds. This legendary craft you see if you've seen X-Files, but this is entrenched in UFO lore.
I like the one you saw, John.
Is it?
Well, maybe.
Yours was triangular in shape, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, after we watch the video, we can ask John if it's anything like what he saw. But let's read this bit here, John. If this is about a man by the name of James Goodall, who kind of broke some of this stuff about the black. It's
before Lazar, right?
This is before Lazar. He was in the same hunting grounds as Lazar.
Hunting grounds.
He was investigating Area 50 region, but before anyone even had heard of Bob Lazar.
It was his own conclusion not later than 1990 that there were at least 8 black programs flying out of Groom,
Lake, Nevada.
Where Area 51 was.
not counting the B-2 and not counting the other known classified programs that are known to have come out of there. One of these, he stated, was a silent flying triangle. Again, this is not later than 1990.
So this guy, he was a journalist for aerospace and aviation.
Right.
And really well respected and really deep into the stuff in this area, but he was following a lot of stuff, coming out of Area
It
51.
explains so many sightings around the world.
Right, and so not later than 1990, he's talking about this black, triangular, silent flying craft that people witness all the time now.
Right.
So I find that fascinating. And we're going to play a video here that looks like it's pulled right from his initial reportings of this.
Goodall asked one of his contacts at Groom Lake, who had been there for 12 years, if he believed in UFOs. The man's answer was, quote, absolutely, positively they exist. Sometime later, the man said, quote, we have things in the Nevada desert that would make George Lucas envious. This is a statement that deserves to be widely known. In around 1995, another of Goodall's sources said, quote, we have the things out there that are literally out of this world, better than Star Trek or anything you could see in the movies.
This comes from Richard Dolan's book, and we'll have a link in the show notes, but he continues in his book and he describes an interesting statement by an intelligence officer named Harry Howard. Howard's analysis of black triangles is that they are an integral part of the secret space fleet. He argues that they absolutely exist. So,
I've seen it.
tell us if this is what you saw. Guys,
I will.
This video will be linked in the show notes under the hidden tech in the night sky, black triangles.
That's not how the one that I saw moved.
Yeah, yours moved more like a mosquito jumping
And
around.
it only had 3 lights. That one has like 5 lights.
Yeah.
So it is a different, like
6 lights, I think.
that moves. It's definitely moving more like a typical craft would move.
But so you take those night vision goggles off and you don't see anything. There's no lights or anything.
Right.
That doesn't look like any plane that I've ever
No.
seen. I mean, it could be a military plane.
But not without lights on.
All right, jump to video 2, John. There's another video here. This one's a little weirder.
I'm all about the weird in the hole. That's fun. Well, that one's weird.
Yeah.
It almost looks like a star or like a
An X-wing fighter
like
or
a
something.
constellation. It looks like it's shifting. The dimensions on it Play it one more time.
That is bizarre.
Very
though.
bizarre.
Really makes me want night vision
Yeah,
goggles.
I guess we don't have to play it again because listeners can't see it, but
Guys, check out these videos. They are really impressive.
they're weird.
And you can go down a rabbit hole of probably hours of this stuff. This guy alleges, and I know...
Put a link to his page or something.
I will. Yeah, we'll have his videos linked in the show notes.
Doesn't Richard Dolan went on an expedition like this, didn't he? Said he saw tons of stuff?
Yeah, he actually references this video. That's how I found it.
Oh, cool.
Richard Dolan linked it. Said it's really pretty difficult to explain. But what's interesting is, I was looking at the TR-3B, right, which is supposedly an anti-gravity spacecraft.
That's the typical triangle.
Right. It officially doesn't exist. This comes from military.com, which I thought was interesting. It doesn't exist officially, the TR-3B anti-gravity spacecraft. It uses highly pressured mercury accelerated by nuclear energy to produce a plasma that creates a field of anti-gravity around the ship. Now that's interesting because I've heard that the Vimana, right, the ancient aircraft of the
Hindu?
Yeah, from ancient India, that the Vimana that the gods would fly around in were powered by like a circulating mercury.
Right.
The same kind of technology, maybe part of this breakaway civilization.
Well, and Bob Lazar talked about that, using mercury.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder what there is to that.
Right, I think he did. I know there's the special element, 113 or whatever, but I thought mercury was involved somehow.
It's funny because that could ties in with alchemy, right? It's interesting.
A lot of interesting stuff.
Secret societies, the knowledge they know. Anyway, can I finish reading this?
Sure.
Conventional thrusters located at the tips of the craft allow it to perform all manner of rapid high-speed maneuvers along all three axes. Interestingly, the plasma generated also reduces radar signature significantly, so it'll be almost invisible on radar and remain undetected. This literally means it can go to any country it likes without being detected by air traffic control and air defense systems. Interesting, right? That,
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me of, what was it, like the Battle of Los Angeles. Remember that?
Right,
During
yeah,
World War
yeah.
II, or leading up to World War II.
Well, it's also, there's different claimed technologies that would explain these sorts of abilities, like the electromagnetic static, or electrically charged static stuff, the Byfield Brown effect. I really do want to get into that one day because it's fascinating. You can watch videos of people doing this in a laboratory. You build this out on a big craft and you have one at the nose and one in the tail, where these two capacitors are charged. You can see how this thing could just float at will, and the only power you need is a little bit of thrust on either side to just change its direction.
Right, exactly.
But it basically makes it weightless. And there's articles about the recent builds of more recent aircraft. The people who are reporting on this they do with their experts in aeronautical engineering, and they're saying, I don't understand how this craft can get this much lift with the weight of what it is, and they can't figure out how it's doing that. And one of the arguments is that it's these technologies, and specifically that Byfield Brown stuff.
Here's an example of that. Supposedly, this is posted on military.com, the website where I just read that description of them.
That kind of looks like
What you saw?
I saw, yeah.
How bizarre that is,
Except
man.
it was darker.
That's the typical black triangle.
Right. This has like 3 points.
And each end has like a light in it.
Yeah, 3 points of light with like a center circle.
So is this supposed to be like captured footage
It
of...
looks like they're looking through it under a microscope.
Yeah, that looks weird.
Might be some like zoomed in.
Can you go to the beginning of it where they separate?
Right there. That's pretty crazy. Well, guys, we'll have this in the show notes too. But yeah, this comes from military.com. I don't know where they got this video from.
Yeah, it's weird. It's also weird coming from military.com. I love how they just sort of adjust in the air.
Yeah, that's definitely cool.
Yeah, if this is real, I mean, it backs up the idea that these things can do things that are
Yeah, it looks very anti-gravity.
Yeah.
just floaty and
Move at will.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, let's get into some witness testimony here. Let's hear from their
Yes,
words.
the witness testimony.
All right, so we heard about Gary McKinnon, right? Talking about the reason he went to Building 8.
Hacking up a storm.
What?
I said hacking up a storm.
Okay, the reason he was hacking up a
On
storm.
the computer.
Thank you.
Not in the throat.
Not a cold. Okay, so the reason he went to Building 8 at NASA was because of the testimony from Donna Hare. She had secret clearance working for a NASA contractor by the name of Philco Ford in the 1970s. She is the one that's come out with the story about her colleague telling her that it's standard practice to airbrush photos of craft that shouldn't be there, that they don't want the public to know, they being NASA. John, if you want to play this clip.
That particular day, I walked into the photo lab in the restricted area, and this was between missions. One of the gentlemen I had been friends with, and I still talk to occasionally, he pointed my attention to one area of this mosaic. It was one panel of a mosaic, which are several panels put together to form a larger picture. And these were I believe they were satellite pictures. I'm not sure. They were aerial, looking down. And I said, this is really interesting. He explained everything. And then he, with a smile on his face, he said, look over there. And I looked, and in one of the photo panels, I saw a round white dot. And at the time, it was very crisp, very sharp lines on it. And I said to him, what is that? Is that a dot on the emulsion? And then he's grinning and he says, dots on the emulsion don't leave round shadows on the ground. And there was a round shadow at the right angle, at the correct angle, the sun shining on the trees. I saw pine trees. I didn't see a coastline. I don't know where this was. But I looked at him and I was pretty startled because I'd worked out there several years and never seen anything like this, never heard of anything like this. And I said, is this a UFO? And he's smiling at me and he says, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that. What I knew he meant was it was, but he couldn't tell me. So I said, what are you going to do with this information? And he said, well, we always have to airbrush them out before we sell them to the public.
Dicks.
And I was just amazed that they had a protocol in place for getting rid of UFO pictures.
Anyways, that clip continues, and she has more to her testimony.
And who is she again? She's
Donna
a contractor?
She was a NASA contractor. She worked for Philco Ford.
You guys think we're going to get disclosure in the next couple years?
I don't think so.
I don't
Unless,
know.
I mean,
I think it's if the people in charge on our planet, if they're pushed by an outside force to disclose,
a
maybe.
benevolent alien force.
But I don't think they're ever going to do it because there's too much benefit for keeping it secret as far as like resources, just control.
Well, there's a really good quote I have coming up here from Dolan about that specific thing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but it's just like, obviously then they can't be, I mean, it's impossible to know. I mean,
you mean the extraterrestrials couldn't be benevolent if they didn't like force our government to tell us?
Well, at some point you'd think that they would like go beyond the government if their plan was to, connect with the population.
If that was their plan.
Yeah,
but
that's
maybe,
what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, you think about
that's why it doesn't seem
they
like
might
they
be
would be benevolent.
But if you look at, like, I don't know if you've watched Star Trek much, but like they have the prime
I
directive.
think you know that he hasn't watched Star Trek
The
much.
prime directive. Even if they want to, they can't directly intervene in the affairs of a world unless that world has already developed
warp technology.
But we're already being interfered by if we've gotten technology from them.
Well, I think the argument would be that they might fight on our behalf to keep it neutral, but they can't directly come in and help us.
They can't decide disclosure.
Right.
It's kind of like, reminds me of that tribe. There's probably more than one, but probably not many left in South America or on different islands that still are unaware of the majority of civilization around the world. Mm-hmm. And even to this, like there's that cargo cult where like they worship, they build this idol god of a plane because they think it's a god because they've never been introduced.
Fly over before.
And so we have this sort of prime directive here on Earth. At least I think most governments are aligned with it, where you don't interrupt a developing
primitive
culture on our planet and let them know about everything else.
If they're already untouched,
you let them go naturally.
But again, if their technology has disrupted our world, and to some degree, it may be used against the population. Doesn't there? You'd think at some point there'd have to be like
a correction.
Yeah. Well, and again, if you listen to a lot of the whistleblowers, there's probably multiple factions.
Yeah.
And I think if anybody who's intervening, it's more likely those are darker.
Like mom and dad are fighting, and they just don't want us to know.
So much speculation.
Right.
Mom and dad are fighting, and they don't want us to know that there's anything wrong going on. They're just trying to work it out.
They're like, just keep growing as you normally do.
Eat your peas.
Get big and strong.
Mommy and dad are just having a discussion.
Unless you listen to Corey Goode's side of the story, where parts of the population are being siphoned away at young ages to join secret military projects because they have special empathic and telepathic and ninja assassin telekinetic abilities.
That's probably the truth.
I'm getting to that later.
All right, can't wait. All right, let's hear one more clip from another guy who has some legitimate credibility.
Play it up.
This is Carl Wolf. He was in the Air Force for 4.5 years beginning in January 1964. He had top secret crypto clearance and worked with the Tactical Air Command at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia.
Yeah, and this is all verified.
Right. While working at a NSA facility, he was shown photographs taken by the lunar orbiter of the moon that showed detailed artificial structures. These photos were taken prior to the Apollo.
I love this guy's testimony.
So this is another example. Supposedly these photos were taken before the moon landing in 1969, the alleged moon landing, wink, wink. But the resolution is, I think he even says in the full clip, we're not going to play the full clip, we'll have it in the show notes, but he says in his interview that it's beyond the resolution we still have today.
About the,
It's still higher def. But John,
300K.
If you want to go ahead and play this clip here.
He told me how everything worked. He showed me the equipment where the digital information came in, where it was converted to photographic images. They were doing 35 millimeter strips of film at that time, which were then assembled into 18.5 by 11 inch mosaics, they were called. There was a digital signature and a grayscale on every 35 millimeter strip. And those strips were from successive passes around the moon. And they would take and build up a photograph. They would scan one section of the moon, then another and another, and then they would get a larger image. So this mosaic then would be put in that contact printer, and that was then a print that was issued to whomever, the press, the scientist, whatever, wherever that was intended to go. So he was showing me how all this worked, and we walked over to one side of the lab, and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose? He said, yes, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And at that point, I became frightened, and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. I was fascinated by it, but I also knew that he was overstepping a boundary that he shouldn't be stepping over. And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings. There were very tall towers and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. So I didn't say any more to him because I was concerned again that somebody was going to come in at any moment, would catch us having this conversation, and we would be in real trouble. I realized that he was telling me this information because he didn't have anybody else to talk to. Now, probably in that laboratory, he was probably one of the few enlisted people, and he was a worker bee. And he had a high-level security clearance, obviously, but he couldn't share that information with anybody else. And in those days, we didn't. When you had your security clearance, you took it seriously. It isn't like today where people don't take these things seriously. We had a different set of morals and ethics and values. That's the way we were raised, and we stayed bound by those agreements. So it was rare that someone would do something like this, but this fellow and I were the same rank. I think he was very distressed. He had the same pallor and demeanor as the scientists outside the room. They were just as concerned as he was, and he needed to discuss it with somebody. So that was the end of it right there. I didn't take it any further than that.
It's interesting. So he was seeing bases and towers on the backside of the moon?
Right, artificial structures that were supposedly taken before we even landed, allegedly.
Yeah, I remember hearing, he was on the Disclosure Project. I remember his testimony because it was so vivid.
Yeah, so we'll have his testimony linked in the show notes as well. A lot of this was brought forth by Stephen Greer and the Disclosure Project. But we'll have all that in the show notes. Just fascinating stuff.
It is.
You know?
It's very interesting.
So why the secrecy, right? This comes from...
this is the $1 million question.
Yeah, and this comes... I just liked his kind of synopsis of it. This is the king of secret space study and Breakaway Civilization, which is
Richard Dolan.
Richard Dolan. John, if you want to begin us off here, this is kind of his summary of why the secrecy, who's behind this, what the Breakaway Civilization really means.
I first thought of the concept of a breakaway civilization in technological terms. Imagine the black budget world on steroids, with presumably alien technology tossed in. I have spoken in the past about a conversation I had with a former civilian scientist at NSA, who said to me that circa 1964 or 65, the NSA had a computer running at clock speeds of 650 megahertz. That's very slow today, but it was 35 years ahead of the consumer market, which did not reach that speed until 2000. So on that basis, you could say the NSA was 35 years ahead of the rest of the world in computing power. Now add exotic technology that did not come from here. Now classify those technologies so that people cannot access them, and that leads to a breakaway civilization where they have access to technology that is unavailable to anyone else.
So this is where he shifts it. Like, that's an example of the technology, right? The breakaway civilization of technology.
Right.
But now he's going to shift it to the power structures, the people behind the scenes.
But we can't stop with technology. We want to see who's running it, who owns it. As we can see in all facets of our society, there is a power that stands behind. For in an ever-centralized global system, we must recognize that power is also increasingly centralized. But such power is not centered on the office of the President of the United States, although the U.S. President has certainly accrued tremendous executive power over the past 50 years or more. But no, the center of gravity of globalization is not in the White House. It is more fruitful to look at the major banks and those private entities that control massive amounts of wealth that stand behind the whole system. It's fair to say that they are the true breakaway civilization. They attend the Bilderberg meetings, the Trilateral Commission meetings, the proceedings of the Council on Foreign Relations, and they participate in the bizarre rites at Bohemian Grove. It's not that these organizations are the club. They themselves are the club. As George Carlin once put it, quote, "It's a big club.
You ain't in it."
You gotta think, would such people reveal a reality in which there is this incredible technology by us as well as by others? Would they ever do it?
Okay, so interestingly, a contact of Dolan's had been on one subcommittee dealing with the, quote, legal implications of disclosure. Now, this is interesting. This is kind of a practical approach of why disclosure might be a bad idea for them. Incidentally, he told me that his subcommittee concluded that, at least from a legal point of view, disclosure promised to be a nightmare. They considered the probable lawsuits that would occur. Start with defense contractors. One defense contractor having access to extraterrestrial technology would constitute unfair trade practices, wouldn't it? Such a seemingly mundane thing, but it was instructive that they were pondering some of these issues. So if you're looking into the practical problems of disclosure, it kind of shows that there's actually things to disclose, but then the dangers of that, not just for the culture and people, oh, you know, is God real? They always claim that with the Brown Institute study.
Oh, right.
Right. But the reality is, like, what does that mean for government and military and defense contractors when you're saying we've been hiding it all these years?
Or you open up your secret clubs to the public. Like, that's the whole point, is the big club.
Why would you give away that power?
Right.
Especially if you do gather in, you know, the woods of Bohemian Grove. But we're going to tell you guys about this because we care.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's the whole thing.
We're all about transparency here.
They
in the
don't
woods.
care.
Yeah,
they don't.
So
we are cattle to them in a lot of ways.
Free resource.
Free resource of delicious.
Anyways, it's a good time for a break. Do you want to play? We got a stinger, John. You want to play?
Yeah. Trisha.
Oh, Trisha.
Oh, cool.
Long time supporter of the show.
Yeah, one of the first.
And she sent in a speak pipe a while back.
Yeah, like last year.
That's right. Yeah.
Sorry it took so long to get to
synchronicity. And we have not done a show on it, but we should sometime.
Absolutely.
Because we all have experienced it. And it's a strange, strange phenomenon.
Yes, it is.
Especially when it comes like hard and fast. And I haven't had it in a while, but there was a point in the show where we were getting it all the time.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You still
have I have them. They haven't been as frequent. Or as
weird
intense.
how they come and go.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, synchronicity is kind of unexplainable, inexplicable coincidences.
A coincidence with meaning.
They have very significant meaning to your life, and they happen in ways that just seem like almost impossible to just happen over and over again in a day.
Right.
Just, through a text or an image or a song.
Oh, wait, we did have a couple for this episode. Remember?
What,
we were talking about...
we did.
In Star Trek, I forget why it came up. We were talking about...
The Zephram Cochrane.
Yeah, first contact in the Star Trek universe was Zephram Cochrane, this inventor who invented warp
That's
drive.
true. Yeah, Chris was saying, like, we were talking about, like, wouldn't it be cool if once we... Or maybe the reason that we were noticed by, the aliens supposedly at the time of Eisenhower was because we were developing nuclear weapons.
And we were talking about the Wright brothers.
Or the Wright brothers. Heavier than air flight. We first started it, and supposedly that's when we were tapped. And now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is this big hub of ET tech and stuff, and it kind of has this mythology that goes back to like the Wright brothers. And it'd be interesting if the extraterrestrials or whatever they are, even if they're from the inner Earth or wherever, they're sharing our airspace. And if the Wright brothers are up there flying around, well, that's when they might have the cue to be like, look, they're going to bump into us up here. Let's introduce ourselves. And that comes from Star Trek. Zephram Cochrane was the guy who developed the warp drive, and at that point, the Vulcans made first contact with humanity. Which it's sci-fi based, but we were just talking about that, but we couldn't remember the guy's name. And then during the recording of this episode, I was looking at the paranormal podcast app that we're going to be on, and the top blog post it said something like, "Are we about to experience
our Zephram Cochrane moment?
Our Zephram Cochrane moment with first contact."
Just a weird,
synchronicity. Another example would be like if your dad was killed by a black octopus and you happened to order coffee for breakfast and it was made by the Black Octopus Coffee Company.
That's another synchronicity. Great example.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's just play that stinger.
Anyways, Trisha, we hope you like this.
Hey guys. It's Trisha. So I wanted to tell you about this synchronicity that I had once that was really weird. I usually get synchronicities through music, whether it's that I hear things in public that are in sync with something that I'm going through. Something on my iPod will play on shuffle right when I want to hear it. So I was in my car driving to the post office in Uniontown, and all of a sudden the Billy Joel song from the Bosom Buddies show, My Life, popped in my head, and I started singing in the car. I get to the post office, and I go inside. in the back, it was playing. And I was just like, okay, that's really, really weird.
That is weird.
Wow. Okay.
Synchronicity theme song. I like that.
What could it be? Is there a message in the patterns I see?
Nice. Beautiful, John. Great.
Thank you.
Synchronicity song, all for Trisha.
Yeah, beautiful.
That was interesting. So was your line there, life's little
memos to
symbols
me?
sending memos?
Little signals sending memos to me.
I like that. I like that line.
Thanks.
That's great.
Beautiful.
But that's a weird synchronicity that Trisha had.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that happens. Something pops
Yeah.
in your head and then you see
Right.
it right after.
Yeah.
Or you hear
think
it.
like the Whitley Strieber thing.
Oh,
you know?
right.
Just like something pops in your head that's just like you don't know why it does, and then it manifests.
plays out in your
physical reality.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have this idea. And I remember talking to Trish about this online, but she was saying how she feels it's more of a, the direction of like you're on the right path, which
Right.
we've talked about before.
Yeah, there's definitely an emotion that comes with it
Yeah.
when something really big happens, and you're like, whoa, and then it gets exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I've made this analogy before, but sometimes it seems to me like when you have these experiences or when you have dreams that are premonition-esque in nature, the idea that like, let's say you're floating in water, right? And your head's just above the water. And that's how regular day life is. And then once in a while, a wave comes. And above you and below you is the past and the present. When that wave hits you in the face, you might get a really vivid moment of the past, or you might get lifted up and then you get a glimpse into the future. But like time is like this membrane that we just float in, and it's not a sturdy, straight thing. It's a gel,
Yeah.
a jelly. And maybe synchronicity is a glimpse into that moment in the future, or, maybe a premonition is you're not really predicting the future as much as you saw it because you were lifted by that wave for a moment, that crest.
Imagine if we lived in
Interesting.
a culture that like really embraced this stuff and
Right?
and sought it out.
We'd
like,
probably further ahead technologically.
way further.
Because we'd be looking
it
at
would
the
be
right
different
things.
type technology
It'd
too.
be a spiritual sort of
Yeah,
technology.
it would be more consciousness based and probably much more in harmony with nature.
Atlantean.
Yeah.
You have mushrooms for breakfast. Psychoactive substances.
Psychedelic mushrooms
are
are
part of like your daily life.
Right. Microdose.
this morning.
Yeah.
All
let's
right,
get
we'll be
around.
back in a few minutes.
Yes.
Maybe not that long.
Shorter for you.
Shorter for you. Goodbye.
See ya.
Lethal expansion episode preview.
All right, so let's get an overview of Corey's galactic allegations, Chris.
Let's do.
How about that?
Yeah.
But keep an open mind. We're not here to poop on them.
Well, hopefully not. I mean, I do think that if this is a deception, which I don't know, the reason I think people are so drawn to it is because there's truth in it. So
exactly.
if we present it, there's going to be elements that probably resonate with you that you're like, I feel like that could be possible. So,
Right. Well, and like you mentioned off air, John, like if what he's saying, if a lot of it is garbage and he is just sort of creating a fantasy, the fact that there's so much UFO lore that's been there, where there's paper trails to it, that's tied into the fantasy, that's what sells. Because there's nodes of truth, as Jeremy would say. Not that this, again, we'll go through this and you guys can make up your own mind, but that's one of the things that kind of seemed apparent to me. For now,
Let's begin the overview of Corey's galactic allegations.
Corey Goode claims to have been directly involved with and/or has been briefed about 5 secret space programs. He says he was trained as a, quote, intuitive empath and completed a 20-year tour of duty from 1987 to 2007 in several of these programs, including one called Solar Warden. Goode claims that in the course of his duty, he came into direct contact with different extraterrestrial groups and alliances that interacted with one or more of the space programs. He says that he served on teams with 3 intuitive empaths used to detect deception during negotiations between different space programs and/or with extraterrestrial visitors.
We're not finished here.
Hello, we're back. We are back and better than ever.
Oh, yes, we are.
What is that?
I'm just getting pumped for
It's
the
aggressive. I don't like
for
it.
the 3rd chapter of the
I don't
episode.
like aggressive.
Well, it's a very short chapter. Oh, we're just going to touch a little bit on
Corey's claims, right?
Right.
Excited. So you've looked a little bit into this Corey character.
There's so
right?
many. I mean,
Corey Goode.
There's so much information because he's done that TV show with.
Did you? We did go through the whole. Did you explain him well enough? Do you think?
I don't know.
It's hard to know because we talked about him a lot before,
and we've been kind of pushing this episode back and back. So
let's give a little background. I think people have probably gleaned that he's a controversial figure in the ufological community right now.
Yeah. So Corey Goode kind of emerged around the end of the first decade of the 2000s, right? I think it was like 2008-ish.
You're going to say like the Pliocene era.
So he's a guy, he's controversial because he has a story that there's been a few other people that have had the same sort of alleged experience of basically getting involved in a military project that takes you off world, right? There's other... MyLab, exactly. MyLab experiences. Where Corey's experience gets a little more controversial is because the amount of information that he supposedly has, that he's still getting from these different entities, different races, and his sort of level of importance in these stories are what makes people a little unsure about.
Well, even just the story itself is controversial. I mean, the fact that you're saying that you're being abducted by this top secret military program and age regressed and all these...
Yeah, that's one of the
He said he served for 60 years, didn't he?
3 tours of 20 years each.
So, and he's in his late 40s?
He was born in, let's see, I think I have a graph
That's kind of what
his time experience.
He's late 40s probably.
I think he's early 40s.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I thought, because he said that he was like 17 in 1980.
85.
Yeah.
He's 6 in 85, I think.
Are you sure? Because that's what I heard today when I was listening.
Well, I'll look into that more for the expansion, but...
I mean, I always liked him just because I liked the story and I wanted it to be real.
Well, when I heard his experience of describing Mars and like being involved in military efforts on Mars, I'd heard it on, I forget what show.
Coast to Coast?
Years and years, it might have been Coast to Coast, but it was years and years ago. And that story itself, I thought was fascinating. I think what turned me off to him was it kept going. And the stories would get more outrageous, more crazy. And his sort of role in these stories seemed to get so large, and that was all audio. Once I was watching him tell these stories, that's when I started to get a little suspicious too. But I don't want to get all into that right now. I just want to kind of give you the idea of some of his claims.
Okay. Lay it on us.
So at age 6, he was identified as an intuitive empathic child by these black operations with precognitive abilities. And these are allegedly, according to Corey, very sought-after skills by secret societies.
Makes sense.
Why wouldn't you want an empath on your team,
So he was discovered at age 6.
Right.
By these secret groups?
Right. And I guess this was going on during school. Like he'd be taken out of school and either his parents didn't know or the lines were wiped or something. Not super clear on that. But he underwent special training once they realized once he evolved to the next program. He went through all these testing periods of his empathic abilities, and then he started to get into training to really beef up these skills that he had to read people, even some precognitive abilities allegedly. But some of the things are very interesting and definitely sound fantastical. Like,
I love it. His avian bird people, the blue avians, was that?
Yeah, that's down way later on.
I'm getting ahead of it. Okay,
way ahead of it. But he's training. There's other kids there that are training. They have telekinetic abilities where they are trained because telekinesis. For those that don't know,
sorry,
that Jenny McCarthy.
Yeah, he was on Jenny McCarthy podcast.
Wow, with David Wilcock. Yeah. What are they doing with that?
That is the dumbest pose I've ever seen in my life.
Should put that in the show notes.
Sorry, we just came across randomly a picture of Corey Goode on the Jenny
Jerry
McCarthy
curl.
show.
He has a Jerry curl mullet, and that's awesome.
That is a strange picture.
Yeah, we'll have to put this picture in the show notes. Look at what does David Wilcock do? It looks like he just landed from the sky.
Oh, see his eyes there, Corey's eyes. There's just something about his eyes that just looks sketchy.
They just plead, believe me.
Maybe that was the 60 years in the
he has 90-year-old eyes.
Oh yeah, you didn't explain. So for those that don't know, the age regression is that you said he's supposedly done three consecutive tours of 20 years each in this program.
It's called the 20 and Back program. And
so that you serve 20 years and then they age regress you back to where you were when you left.
And there's been other, quote, Mars whistleblowers that have talked about this 20 and Back thing.
Really?
I think that precede him. They were before his story.
Probably, before we get too further, I don't know, this may spoil it a little bit, but wouldn't they not let you talk about this stuff?
Well, that's the thing. Each one of these whistleblowers have, they have an explanation. For example, Corey's explanation is there's an alliance that wants him to start revealing this. So that's his thing.
I gotcha.
The other, there's another whistleblower. We'll get more into that in the next expansion. But they just say basically like they're just letting them do it for whatever reason, which to me sounds like misinformation if it did in fact happen. And there are arguments to be made that maybe some are more believable than others. We'll get into that again. I feel like I'm saying a lot.
Okay, so this is all coming up in the expansion.
Right.
Yeah, we are getting kind of off the trail.
I just wanted to get
into
into some of his claims.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah, I think we've kind of gave a little bit of a backstory, so you can probably get to the claims now.
Well, that's these are his backstory is part of the claims.
Okay.
Okay. Let's keep jumping ahead. So then he's taken that program, right? At age 17, he gets taken into the secret military program. This is after he's been trained to beef up those skills that he has.
He's like an empath.
Worked alongside with kids who were more telekinetically prone, so they could move things with their mind. And these kids is interesting. Spoonbenders? Carry. That's pyrotelekinetics, I think, but same idea.
She can move stuff too, right?
Yes.
Enough.
Maybe.
Did she move a knife? Okay, it's not good.
She wasn't real. Okay. She was not real. Anyway, so he's working with alongside these kids who are more telekinetically prone. Their missions are much more devious because they're taught to basically become telekinetic wizard assassins, where they can remote view to find their targets and then kill them with their mind.
Ugh, like evil Harry Potter.
Sure.
Telepathic abilities.
That sounds right. That sounds like a good analogy. And one of the technological things that Corey describes are these pads that these kids stand on, and they allow them to increase their telekinetic,
abilities.
Telekinetic amplifiers. That's the good way to put it. You should write them and tell them to call it that
instead of what pads.
I don't know. All interesting stuff.
Interesting is a word, yes.
Interesting stuff. The age regression again, according to Corey, this age regression technology came from this Nordic race, right? And this Nordic race is they're some of the good guys in this never-ending battle of good and evil that you hear about, all the time. And so on the bad side are the Draculians, and they are in partnership with the leftover breakaway Nazi civilization.
So maybe we're part of the Nordic.
That's allegedly, there's the Earth group that's on the side.
That's why we get so many synchronicities.
Or like us specifically?
Yeah.
Or we're taken away and we're not known it, that maybe at night we're taken away and whisked to.
No, we're through the show, we're spreading information.
Is this the idea?
I don't know if I would give us claims that high.
Is there a suggestion because they're the.
I have a fucking chip in my ear.
Is there a suggestion here that what are they called again? The Nordics, right? Are they called it because they look Norwegian, Nordic, like blonde hair, blue eyes?
Yeah.
But is there a suggestion somewhere that like genetically the Nordic people or the people that look like that are from that area? Maybe
I'm not sure.
Like,
that's a whole.
There's an Asian
that goes
race
into like ancient exopolitics and stuff. I don't know, which I'm sure
because he does get into the Mayans, right?
Yes, the Mayans come up.
Doesn't he argue that the original breakaway civilization were when the Mayans flew away in their stone spacecraft?
Yes, they were one of the ancient breakaway civilizations, and they're Mayan spaceships.
What I love is the depiction. I don't know if we have it here. Maybe we'll have this in the expansion.
Yeah,
but there's a depiction of them. They're Mayans, and they look, they're wearing very simple tunics, right? But they're somehow look also like kind of like fantasy, futuristic, magical. And there's like a levitating stone that they're like inscribing with like blue sci-fi phasers or something.
Yeah.
It just basically looks like they took the Mayan civilization and just souped up the sci-fi fantasy aspect. Yeah. But maybe.
Maybe, baby.
Maybe it's real.
And this one claim that he has, he was in the service on Mars. And this is what I remember him describing on a radio show, Coast to Coast or something, a long time ago. This might be something that sounds familiar to you guys. He said basically that he saw short, hardy cactus-like shrubs on Mars. They were colored with purple and red with thick stalks below. There are also small burrowing animals, according to Corey, and an indigenous race of humans with reddish skin. They wear robes, and they are very skittish around humans. One of these beings, according to Corey, was interrogated and claimed that his race was indigenous to Mars and originated there. So maybe
they're three-dimensional from the third dimension?
Meaning, like us? Like they're three-dimensional, like not flat.
they're not on paper?
No, you know what I mean? Like
they just live on Mars. Yeah. They're not interdimensional. Yeah, they're in our dimension. Anyway, some other claims that Corey has that are pretty awesome. There's an insectoid race. We're going to get into the expansion a little bit, his experience with those guys. But those guys, much like our insects on our planet, how some insects have developed camouflage over, periods of evolution. The insectoids that have been allowed to evolve on their own planets have turned that camouflage into psychic camouflage, where they can camouflage. They can make you think that they are a CEO of,
AT&T.
Tesla or AT&T. you know? So
Oh, so is that where some of that comes from? When
So
remember they talked about the latest episode about how like all the CEOs were stepping down
Oh, yeah.
right
right,
before
right.
Corona, and I suggested they were ant people, and you laughed at me. And now you're
I was
saying
wrong.
that they could easily be insectoids.
absolutely. Well, there's
there.
a story coming up in the expansion about Corey helping interrogate or get the intentions behind interrogation behind a CEO of a major corporation in the States, but he was really an ant person.
See,
Yeah.
that wasn't such a crazy
Cool.
thought.
But yeah, some of the things, we'll get into this. There's really interesting, really fascinating stories, and you can take from it what you want. But some of the stuff in there that I think makes people go, is that, he is this sort of important person. He's the delegate for humankind to the
ambassador,
blue
right?
avian bird people. And also he's also an ambassador. He's just really good at being an ambassador to an inner Earth community of time travelers known as the Anshar. And that's kind of who he's really working with a lot today. Them and the blue avian bird people.
It'd
And
be interesting to get him on the show.
it
If
would
ever
be
come on.
interesting. But yeah, we'll get more into that in the expansion.
I mean, again, but this is the whole thing, is there's no proof. It's just all story.
Right.
But it's a fun story.
The circumstantial evidence is that a lot of his stuff lines up with more, I would say, dependable testimony from other corroboration. But there is the argument that, as we're going to get into, there might be reasons why Corey has the same story. They might be a little more suspect.
So that's what I'm kind of interested too. Is
Keep an open mind, judge for yourself.
Yeah. And I don't want to throw shade, as the kids say, on Corey Goode.
But I do think it is interesting. Like we never talk about the inside workings of like the fringe
Ufology,
communities
yeah.
and the icons. Like it's kind of interesting to think about like, get into some of the fun controversy and is Corey good or
Right.
bad? That's the whole kind of point of the episode.
Yeah. And
and we'll be fair. We're not going to just
Right.
like poop on them because they're ridiculous topics.
Yeah.
Obviously we cover
I
ridiculous
mean,
topics.
obviously, yeah, we've gone. I mean, a lot of what he talks about, I don't think is impossible.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, and we talked about anybody's not an expansion member, or if you're an expansion member to the show and you didn't hear it last episode expansion, we were going to do Corey Goode then, but we ended up doing a whole episode on Stargates.
Right.
So that just took up so much good time there that now we're going to do the Corey Good or Bad finally.
Yeah.
So get in your upright positions for this
So,
one.
yeah, if you want to hear this, definitely head over to
Believeful.com and click on the Patreon button.
and we do double the episodes.
Get in it.
We thank
And,
everyone who's supporting us there.
Don't you have another stinger?
Yeah, this is a classic.
Special treat.
This is a friend treat from our good friend Nick Benson.
All right.
And we are welcoming him into the whole because he's been our friend since we were little children.
Yeah, the pseudo big brother.
And so stoked that he likes listening to us. I'm glad that we get to keep him company. He probably still feels like he's in our lives a little bit. I wish he had a show that we could listen to.
I think about that with all my friends who listen.
I wish we could get to hear him. We only get to speak at our friends. We don't get to hear them speak back.
You can always pick up the phone, Jeremy.
That's true. I'm not good at that.
But Nick, this song is for you. It is a mix of some quotes that we used to watch from the movie Congo.
Yes!
Oh, it's Tim Curry?
Yeah.
The Galelas.
The diamonds are here!
Nick Benson. Nick Benson.
Dance it, Nick, dance
Nick
it.
Benson. Nick Benson.
The diamonds are here!
What is this?
The myth of the killer ape is true!
Singe, city of, singe,
That's great.
city of, singe, city of,
You'll get nothing like it.
singe, city of, singe, city of, singe, city of, singe.
Nick Benson.
The Cybot wins.
That's
terrific, man.
It's like I was in the Congo with Tim Curry.
The diamonds. We also named his car, I think it was a Buick. We called it Zinge.
That's
It's this long
That's awesome.
boat of a car. We had a lot of good times in there.
Great.
What's that?
That's would be a sweet, electronic artist name.
Zinge,
Zinge.
yeah.
If you guys haven't seen the movie Congo, check it out.
I feel like that was one of our first movie references. Was
I
Congo.
think so.
Amy, ugly woman.
Me, Amy. Anyway, that's our show.
That's our show.
Yeah, but yeah, thanks, Nick. Thanks for signing up. That just
Appreciate
reminded me
it, buddy.
of watching you guys dance, and we lived in Austin together.
Yeah, we were roommates for a while down there, and we'd always dance to techno music together.
Those were the
And
times.
we go to the Spider House. Anyway,
What do you guys think? Black budget. And this is definitely one we're gonna. We've talked about episodes before. Like one we'll retouch on. This one, there's so many interests. Like when it comes to, you got the Virile Society, you've got the Byfield Brown effect, you've got all these different aspects. We can
German
go
research, Nazis in Antarctica.
Yeah, we could just go into different aspects of this and spend a few episodes doing it. And this is one I definitely do want to go back to because there's so much in here, and there's so much good research from Dolan and some interesting circumstantial evidence from Sal's work that he's really good at weaving together testimony to create sort of a narrative that might be a little more thinner when it comes to hard evidence, unlike Dolan, but he does weave sort of a chronology.
He does a
which
lot
is
of
interesting.
research.
He does.
A lot
He
of it
definitely
is
does a lot of
circumstantial, but it's
really good research.
Definitely paints an interesting picture based on history and time.
Yeah.
So thanks, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks again to our patrons. You guys really do keep us going. If you're not a patron yet, you can sign up and get double the episodes, like you said, John. And
if you can't swing it financially right now, we do really appreciate reviews. Facebook, iTunes, all
Shares,
those places, Stitcher.
anything you can do to spread the whole.
Oh yeah, show it to your friends and
Right.
let us know you did, and that helps us and makes us feel happy in our hearts. So, thanks, guys, and we will
catch you next episode
on
The
Beliefful.
Beliefful.